Hi, everybody, and welcome to Everyday Intuition. I am Evidential Medium Brandon Russ. Thank you so much for joining us once again. With me, as always, here on the podcast side of things, Tracy's chiming in again. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Hi, guys. How's everybody doing today?
Doing fantastic. And I'm really excited about our next guest. I've known her for a long time. I also I also love the topic. Today we are joined by psychotherapist Kathy Medbery. And she's going to talk to us about labyrinths, kind of how they're not only healing, but also a little bit of the history and how accessible they really are for you, not only for your own meditation practices, but whether you're on a healing journey, whether you're on a spiritual journey. It really fits in a lot of different ways. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure to be here, Brandon.
Oh, fantastic. So, first and foremost, as someone that works with labyrinths, how did you first kind of discover labyrinths, and what really helped them stand out for you, not only for your own spiritual journey, but how they could help other people?
I don't know. It feels like it's been a part of my life for quite a while. I think the first one I walked was in Norway when I was traveling in the 90s. And it's such, as a psychotherapist, it's a wonderful tool. And because a good part of the psychotherapy that I have done is about mindfulness as a way to train mindfulness in an activity so that one doesn't need to be sitting still alone. One can be mindful while moving, and in this path into the center and back out again takes some mindfulness. So it's been a tool. I think I've used it in psychotherapy probably 15 years.
Wow. I think it's, you said a lot with that. And I think when you look at kind of like what we're faced with today, having a couple of children with ADHD, with having, even the mindfulness in the classroom work that I've done, that part of it, you remember the fidget spinners thing, which were just a disaster for distraction. You thought you were kind of burning off energy, but it became a whole different thing than its original intention. This is kind of having the physical activity along with the mindfulness really kind of draws it to something you need to concentrate on, which I think is a key thing. Yeah. So you mentioned Norway. Have you seen labyrinths in other countries?
Yeah.
Like, is that kind of a mainstay for you to find them when you travel?
They're hidden in plain sight. And when you have antenna for things, we are in Amsterdam, and our friend in Amsterdam didn't know that there was a labyrinth on the path to the main museum, the Rijksmuseum. We are in Austria, and in the Stromberg Palace, there is a really wonky labyrinth. They're all over.
Wow. What makes it wonky?
Well, it's not square, and it's not a circle. It kind of goes in odd directions. And it's a hedge, so it almost felt like a maze. A maze is kind of a game.
Sure.
You get lost in. A labyrinth is not. A labyrinth brings you very definitely to the center in a circuitous path. Mm-hmm. And then you go back out the same way. So it was a labyrinth, but it was oddly shaped.
Wow, that's crazy. In upstate New York, there is what's called a labyrinth, which is done with lavender, and it comes up to about the hip. And it's like you can't really see into the center, although the center is slightly raised, so you kind of know it's there. And it's not hidden. You're not playing hide and go seek. It's not that tall, but just because of the natural size of the lavender, it comes up just enough. First of all, it smells fantastic, but it also, it's also kind of oddly shaped. And that was when and that was probably about 3 years ago, I actually did a workshop on the space because of that. And we actually talked about labyrinths. And one of the things that through my own discovery, I didn't realize how many different types of labyrinths there really are. And can you kind of walk us through that? Because there really is purpose with each one of them.
There are. So that I thought that I might mention first the hand labyrinth, because you can run it with your finger, and so that you don't it takes a kind of a focus, but it creates a trance. And I just recently read about Ireland's history that has hand labyrinths that they actually called Troy stones. They were used by mediums and midwives, and they were used along with songs that created a trance. So they were,
Interesting.
yeah, I was fascinated with that. So that's one thing. The Chartres labyrinth is a 12 circuit labyrinth that was in the Chartres Cathedral. So this is a very Christian Catholic labyrinth, but the history of it I just love. The Chartres Cathedral is a wonderful esoteric building, and it has a magnificent rose window on the east side that the sun comes in the morning. Mm-hmm. And that rose window has a center, which is the New Jerusalem. Huh. And so that, when the sun comes in, the labyrinth is on the floor of the cathedral. When the sun comes in, it superimposes on the labyrinth, and the New Jerusalem is in the middle. It was built in the 11th or 12th century when people were wanting to go to Jerusalem for their pilgrimage, but weren't able to because of the wars, the Crusades. And so they would travel that labyrinth as their pilgrimage to the New Jerusalem, And the New Jerusalem is also their goal. So it was a spiritual path.
Wow. So that's, so it's almost like, in a sense, how they represented it was more of like, hey, listen, this is a spiritual path, a spiritual journey. You can treat this labyrinth as the journey itself. Yes. And it's, it's funny that you bring up the Crusades with this too, because, as you were talking about this, I'm thinking to myself, like, here's this profound religious connection, but I've always learned that labyrinths are not necessarily religious by nature, but they are kind of truth-seeking by nature. So, I mean, how are labyrinths more religious than what I gave it credit for, or what's, or is it just so specific depending upon what the denomination, sees it as?
I think that they're spiritual. I think they existed before Christianity. I think that Christianity has kind of, as they co-opt many things that are spiritually in nature, and they take them on, and that becomes part of their tradition. But the most commonly known labyrinth is really the Cretan labyrinth. And the story of the Cretan labyrinth is a story way before Christ.
Yeah.
The idea of the Greeks having to send their youths to feed the Minotaur in the center of the labyrinth. So that becomes, so that for me becomes the Jungian archetypal story that I've used with a lot of people in psychotherapy, with the Theseus is the hero. And he needs to go in and he needs to slay the monster, which in psychotherapy would be one's shadow.
So is this kind of like, doing the dark work, so to speak, the shadow self, all that good stuff? Yeah. Wow, always timely, Kathy, always timely. So
and I have to say, he can't do it alone. He needs the female aspect of the heroine.
Interesting. So there's male and female balance.
Yes, and so it's the king's daughter, Ariadne, that gives him the string that helps him to get back out again. Because in a labyrinth, the important part is to get to the center. It's also really important to bring your truth back out, or with Theseus and Ariadne, to be able to come out of the labyrinth okay.
That's a whole other dynamic, because it's, there is that where, you watch people kind of walk through it, and of course, when you're at a lavender farm, you see people, picking the lavender, and it's, it's all about it's all about the lavender, at a place like that. But I've seen other labyrinths where when, you walk it, somebody gets to the center and they're like, hey, I'm done. And they go walking off to the side and you're just like, you cringe because you're just like, that's wrong. I don't know what's right, but that's wrong. And that's terrible. And it's funny, you say that they're hidden in plain sight. There are some great resources out there, just on Bing or Google or whatever your search engine of choice is. There's the Labyrinth Society in the United States that will basically show you a map of ones that are done, and you'd be surprised how many municipalities add that into, say, a park system, or what have you. And then other people that will create them in their own backyard will even say, hey, listen, I'm okay if somebody stops by and walks through my labyrinth, that sort of thing, which is a bit of a segue. And you've actually built a labyrinth yourself. Like, what were some of the things that you discovered with that, with building your own labyrinth? And what can you tell us about it?
I started building labyrinths on the front yard with lime. So there's a simple directions, on how to make those paths. And my husband didn't want me to do stone or wood because he wanted to mow that lawn. So I did it with lime, and I would use it with clients. And that was in the 2000s. In 2012, I think it was, I did one. We put in solar panels and it cleared out the whole back part of our property. And I put one in the woods. And I'll just say, I just love my woodland labyrinth. The trees cooperated. There's just enough space for that.
Yeah.
This was the one that was done in lime because it was done with sacred geometry. It was done to create a sacred space very consciously. The idea that when you come into this space, it is a place to be thoughtful. And
can you walk us through how you determined that the opening went there?
Okay, so I wanted it to be like the ancient temples, to be oriented to the east. I wanted this to be at the equinox sunrise. So I used a compass. It got kind of complicated for me because there's magnetic north and there's actual north, and so I worked this out as carefully as I could. And then drew it out like this. Did a radius, did the whole thing, and then had to fit it into that. It was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah, and it's, and again, and here's the thing, I always say this to people that are like, hey, I found this one out in, Boonesville or wherever. And the first thing I say to them is, well, that's not necessarily spiritually psychometrized. It's not using sacred geometry. What they do is they say, okay, it's perpendicular to the road. You walk up the path to the sidewalk, and then there's a labyrinth. So there's a pretty good chance, that unless their grid system of the city somehow lined up with the sacred geometry, that there's a pretty good chance that labyrinth doesn't necessarily have a spiritual center per se. But as you're walking through this, you had done a lot of that work, and you're talking about sacred geometry. What sacred geometry went into building the labyrinth?
So it was a decision about what shape I wanted. Now, you can't see the shape when you look at the labyrinth, but it was consciously done as an octagon, so that it has the 8 points. That works in terms of it being oriented to the east, so that you have the cross quarter sections of the compass, but you also have the cross quarter sections of the year. So where the sun rises on the solstice is going to be northeast, and where the sun rises in the winter solstice is going to be in the southeast. And those are also marked. They're marked by stones, and there needed to be granite at the compass points, and marble. I got marble squares because they were identified in what I was reading as a more feminine stone, and there was a desire to have both the balance of the male and female. As the octagon is also a shape, sacred geometry that represents the so it represents the above and below, as well as the male and female and general balance. So this is the labyrinth that's there today. And so that I did it with stone. This was the third labyrinth that I did in this place. This was done in stone. And you see, this is at an angle to where the entrance is. But
Sure.
where the entrance is, and you go straight, there's a center there. And then beyond that is where the east is. So, yes. So, and the idea that it was, you said, Brandon, about it being, it may not be in some way consecrated or something. Actually, so much of this is about intention.
Yes.
And it was the intention to build this sacred space. So I also use dowsing rods, and there is a way that you request the water to underground water to come in that particular spot. Wow. I recently redoused it, and it said that, yeah, there was water right there, and it crossed. So that adds to the kind of the power of this place. But it's also my belief that anybody who walks a labyrinth, any place, with intention, it becomes a spiritual tool.
Right. So it's
that person's intention.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're saying that, because I think, and I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, this town should really rip up their labyrinth because they didn't do it the right way, and it'll open up a gateway and all that other stuff. That's what we're trying to rebuke. But I'm glad that you're saying that about intention, because not only in building it, in walking it, you have to have that intention. And I know that each level of the labyrinth is really kind of a set mindset. I've seen meditations where it's, as I enter in this, as I walk through this, as I, come to the center, this is where my heart space is. As I leave, this is what I do. What's your idea, and what's your take on when people come to your labyrinth and walk it? What do you want them to experience?
It depends on the people. We've done an Airbnb here. And so I've had Airbnb people come, and I'm not going to get deep into spirituality, and I'm not going to get into psychotherapy with them. This is just a cool thing. I had one Airbnb person that said to me, you have fairies in your backyard? Yeah.
Of course. Of course you did. Of course you do. I mean, you have, you created a playground for them. So of course you have them, right?
Yeah. But like when the grandkids come and they have their own thing, I have in the center, I have a lovely crystal. And so they will walk it. And I call the crystal a wishing stone. And so you make your pathway into the center, you hold the wishing stone, and you make your wish, and then you bring it back out again. But for the grandkids, if they jump over the circuits, this is meant to be fun. This is not,
right.
This doesn't have to be serious. But the other levels of that idea of a wishing stone is that you're manifesting.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like everything that you're talking about is kind of like the perfect storm of, you mentioned above and below. You've kind of got this earthbound shamanism to it. You have, certainly working with the crystals. And then, this last kind of part about this as well. It's almost a little bit of the, whether you want to talk about the secret or whatever manifesting paradigm it is that you subscribe to, which, by the way, is actually, if you really want to go back and then go back even further, it's more of the Gnostic gospel conversation. It's more of, of being into a time where you would visualize where it is that you wanted to be, how you wanted to be, and where you wanted to be. And you have all of these elements together with this. It's almost as if this is like the perfect tool for any walk of life in so many ways.
So what I'd say, it is a very multifaceted tool.
Oh.
It can be used in so many different ways.
Tracy, we're going to have to jot that down. She used the word multifaceted. We have to use that word several times throughout the podcast. Right? You got that, right?
Yes, multifaceted.
And by the way, Tracy's a teacher by trade, so she keeps me in line and treats me as a teacher from time to time. So that's why I'm saying to her, if we're going to have some words to work on at home, let's go with the multifaceted. But with this though, you have this in your space. Would you work with clients back there? And I know you can't necessarily share specific stories, but what are some of the experiences that you found people really kind of having this epiphany where they otherwise wouldn't have done that specific work? If you understand what I'm asking.
Right. As I said, a basic part of the psychotherapy has always been mindfulness, but it's usually mindfulness in the office.
Yeah.
And it's sitting still and then talking about how you can use it out in your life. But this is a journey. This is very concrete. The trees have created a real limit, a boundary for how much space I had, which meant that each of the pathways are only about 12 inches, which means one has to really pay attention to where one puts one's feet when one's walking. So there's a kind of mindfulness built in there. But so for clients, often I know their issues, and it's kind of like what I would say to them. One of the terms I use in psychotherapy is wise mind, is the acceptance, the expectation that all of the wisdom you need is really within you. And the way to access it is to be still and to listen and to also formulate your question. The formulation of your question is very important in getting the answer. And so it would be taking whatever issue that the client is working on and that's up for them at the time, is how would you formulate what you need or what you want at this time, and then follow your pathway in, and then hold the crystal and wait in stillness for your answer, and then bring that answer back out into your world.
I feel like we're in therapy right now.
What can I say, Brandon?
Well, I mean that in a good way, because even like as you're saying it, I'm visualizing like as in like I can't wait to do something like this. And I've walked a lot of labyrinths, and I've actually done it again from a meditative mindfulness standpoint. I don't have the background or credentials for for somebody kind of in that part of their journey for therapy, but I have worked with people that are really kind of looking for it in a spiritual path. And the thing that I would always kind of set for the intention was kind of like, where do you want your relationships to go with kind of your spiritual family? Like that's where, maybe you're working on stuff with your guides, your angels, someone that that passed, that you're hoping kind of comes in and steps in for you. Maybe it is, maybe a little more surface, like how do you want to bring this to the world? How do you want this to look for you? And so when I work with people with that, and I've ever talked about labyrinths, it's usually about like, you can find where you want to go in the center, because you'll find the direction on the way out. And it's interesting to me, because I think I think a lot of people are fascinated with labyrinths. I genuinely do. I think when people see them, they're like, wow, that's really cool. Here in the city that I live in, they actually have a labyrinth on the playground. Like, I know, right? It's not the school my kids go to, clearly, but it's it is something though that it was where the summer program works out of and that sort of thing. And we got the biggest kick walking through it. And you're right, like they go all the way through and they're like, hey, I'm done, swing set's free, and off they go. But for them to take even that minute and a half to kind of go through that, I found a ton of value for them to just kind of be quiet, and not for the parent reasons to be quiet, but for them to just kind of like be reflective for a minute, concentrate on that 14 inches of space that they have to follow around, and then feel like they've accomplished something. And that's another thing that I think labyrinths really kind of bring to this from a spiritual level, that it's actually something really concrete when we're trying to follow something that's so esoteric, that's so out there, that ends up being conversations and can ultimately be in conflict of what you hear and conversations that you have, or conflicts within yourself. Here's something very concrete where you can say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, do this activity, do this mental sparring, if you will, to say, this is where I want to go with this, bring it to center, find it there, and then find the challenge to come out. I think that's, to me, that's what I find with the spiritual side of this, is that it's a concrete tool. It's part of the reason why we love crystals so much. It's part of the reason why, tarot or oracle cards are so prevalent in this work, because it's tangible. You can flip it over and say hello. labyrinths, I think, are that kind of body psychometry that you do for you to kind of reset yourself and go through that. Did you have any? Go ahead, Kathy.
I also understand that there's some science about when you go back and forth on the labyrinth like that it affects the balance within your ears. And so that it also helps you to rebalance very physically.
Here is my take on that. I talk about it all the time. The science of the intuition is how the left brain and the right brain really have to be at play, always. So when you say the ears are in balance and so forth and so on, that's exactly where I go to, because and again, this is where I bring science into this, where you have your left brain and your right brain kind of going back and forth. You go back between the logical and the impractical and the dreamy and the concrete, and you go back and forth over and over again. But what's actually happening is you're slowly kind of working over the pineal gland. You're slowly going over that intuitive center that's also kind of triggering the antenna, the Wi-Fi that you're receiving all of this to. So if your ears are in balance, that makes perfect sense. If you're physically feeling balance, whether you're doing chakra balancing, whether you're doing chakra connection, there's a lot to that. And I know that there's a lot of, there's a lot to the chakras in and of itself within the labyrinths as well. Do you want to talk about that, Kathy?
Sounds like a good time to talk about that.
Perfect. And Tracy, I think we have a slide for that.
So I'm very excited about the use of the labyrinth like this. To see it as the chakras. As I said, it doesn't need to be this complex for people, but for me, I just love this aspect of it. So let me that each of those levels, each of the circuits stands for a chakra. So you enter and you go to the third chakra. You go to the solar plexus, which I see as intention. And so you do the first circuit is about what is your intention in doing this particular chakra walk. And then the circuits take you out. They don't bring you to the center right away. They bring you to the second chakra, which is your instinct. So what's your instinct about this issue or relationship or dream you're working on? What's your emotional intelligence about this? And it takes a little bit longer to walk around that. But then you do a complete turn again, and you're in the first chakra. You're grounded. And it's about, this one is the physical, which takes the longest to manifest, is through the physical. But this is how does it look in the physical life? And that's the longest. But then when you make that turn, you go right to the heart chakra. You go to the fourth, and that's the unconditional love of yourself, of others. This is the heart. This is the center. And then again, this time you go right to the crown. It brings you almost to the center, but you're not at the center yet, because it takes you right away, and it takes you to the third eye, and then to the throat chakra, which would be your voice, which would be how you speak your truth and how you create your truth. And only then does it take you to the very center. And the center is actually above your head. It is your God center that is above your crown chakra.
I see the planet connection here too.
I know. And there's also tone and sound connection. There are just so many levels and ways to do this. But yes, the planet connection, isn't that cool?
That's incredible, because to see this visually, like when you look at it really quick and you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, ta-da! And then you walk it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, how you explained it. And I'm just floored that the center is actually about your voice. And, and again, we talk in terms of linear all the time. Like, we just want linear. So we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're like, okay, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But when you walk this, your activity is actually more about you understanding kind of your path, and that it's not a straight line, that you really kind of do have them interact with things. And, you know, my take on this as you're talking, you go into the solar plexus right away, because this is something that this is your gut feeling, as in this is going to be something part of your path. Like I think that as you talk solar plexus, and then your sacral is really kind of identifying things like your passions and how you go about things, and then into your root, which I absolutely love that it's represented by the longest part of this, because your root really talks about your ancestry, your lineage, all the things that you're born into. You know, and frankly, one of the reasons why there's so much work to self-discovery, you know, because of the family you're born into, because of the you know, the socioeconomics and all the things that you come into this life, born into the body that you're born into. And then to make this turn into the heart part of this is really profound for me, because you are also, the labyrinth also talks about, like, you've got to love this. So many people, and this is just me on the spiritual side of this, I see people all the time that end up having this adversarial relationship with their upbringing, because they have that adversarial upbringing, instead of looking at it from the standpoint of, I went through this because it gave me a great tool. They look at it as in, like, it makes me upset. This is also inclusive for religion. I've seen this a lot, you know, with Catholicism, where people are just flat out angry with it. I'm not justifying any of the activities of the church, but what I am going to call out is, so do you not believe in it anymore? The Ten Commandments not a good idea? You were still given this for a reason. So for you to kind of embrace where you came from and then love it with this next level is really important. And, you know, brushing up on my astrology here, I believe that's earthbound. Am I correct in saying? Or is this sunbound? This is centerbound. Yeah, centerbound for the sun. So you are centered in yourself. That is, you know, your heart being the center chakra is all about, you know, being in the middle. And, you know, moving forward into this with your, you know, with your own development and your connection with Creator, recognizing who you are and that you're built in a very specific way. I will still hear the, you know, the argument of intelligent design when we start to pick things apart like this, because we might evolve, but on the other side of this, there is something directly from Creator that gives us this. I think this is a great reminder. And then your third eye is about your ability and, you know, walking into your own truth, you know, with the throat chakra, with the, you know, speaking your truth, living your truth, acting in your truth, all of those things being the centerpiece of that, boy, is really, that to me is really profound.
It's very rich. Now, the thing is, it's just as important that you're paying attention as you walk out of it. So you have your answer, you have your clarity, you have your wise mind, and the first place you go when you leave is to your voice. How do you phrase that to yourself? How do you verbalize that? And then, you know, then you go from, you know, from the voice to the third eye. What's your intuition, and then your crown, and then from there your unity, we're all one, and then to the heart with your answer or with your insight. It's like, where is the heart on that? Does that match? And then you go to, how am I going to bring this into the world? How am I going to treat somebody different? How am I going to do a project differently? How am I going to express this in art or music? And then into the instinct. What's my instinct about how I'm going to do it? And then the intention that you're bringing it out into the world.
I love everything about this. I mean, I think from the self-discovery, and anybody that's on a journey that's being cerebral about this, and even if it's just a relaxing thing, that if you want to go the medical side of this, and even if your parasympathetic and sympathetic start to reconcile because you take a, you know, deep breath as you walk through this, so be it. But I think from the spiritual side of this, it's so profound. And I know that there's, you know, labyrinths themselves are cool. They're, you know, they're things that are nifty to work with. But when you break it down like this, I think it's really profound that it's kind of cross-cultural, it's cross linear. It blows up the linear, and it really allows you to kind of go within. And I mentioned this before, but there's no straight lines. There's none. So
I feel like almost straight lines is almost like very Western thought of train of thought. And like, I love the fact that like the root on the outside, you're with your root the longest of your entire life. It's the one that you recognize the most. And so that's the one that takes the most healing. And then once you learn to heal your root and stop living in fear of whatever has been the past of your upbringing, that's when you can turn into the love with your heart, which then it opens your crown, it opens your third eye, it gives you the voice so that you can use your ability to speak and see to connect with what it is you're meant to connect with. And then you bring that back to like your root, which is on your way out, like your root, which is your ancestors and anybody that will come like behind and forward. So.
And and the other part of this too is that it's a human thing. You say it's a thing that you're with the longest, in this body. And I think that's the tangible thing you can work with here. That's the thing that helps you really kind of conceptualize it. It's that part we were talking about before where, you've got these tools that allow you to conceptualize what is going on here. I mean, that's incredible. And I see the markings up in the corner talking about the road to Jerusalem. What's that? Go ahead, Kathy.
So the idea that this is so rich and multidimensional and multifaceted as a tool, but it also is, there's no right way to do a labyrinth. So going back to the kids playing in the labyrinth, or dancing through it, or having it just be a fun thing, or having it be a serious journey inward. In this model. Many things are true at once. And so all of this is true for labyrinths.
Many things are true at once. I love that statement.
Yeah.
Many things are true at once. So what advice would you give anyone that really wants to seek out a labyrinth for, their own work, whatever their work is, whether it's spiritual, whether it's therapeutic? What advice would you give to them?
Well, the idea that there are labyrinth sites on the internet that you can find both the labyrinths. You can find directions on how to build your own at home. You can find the ones in your area, churches, schools, parks. They tend to be there. There are quite a few of them. I mean, I know in my area in Connecticut, there are quite a few of them. So that. The other thing is, as a daily practice, if that's part of your meditation, using a finger labyrinth can be another way to do it.
Yeah, let's see yours.
You want to see my finger labyrinth?
Sure.
So this one here is actually a coaster. It's actually a cedar coaster. So if I put my warm drink on it, it smells like cedar. But that it is also a 10-circuit labyrinth. So it's much like the Chakra labyrinth, in that you not only do the circuits, but you do them in the 4 directions, which for me tends to be like the Native American looking at the medicine wheel and the 4 directions.
Yes.
There are also, I didn't show you this one before, this is a finger labyrinth in the form of a bowl, but it has the ridges, and you can trace your hand through that.
That's really cool.
This is my favorite mug. I got this in Santa Fe, but this is our Native American. This is the Hopi Indians have in their baskets. This is called the man in the maze. It's a labyrinth.
That's incredible.
So the idea that they are all over the world, all kinds of people, long before Christ. Mm-hmm. With Christ, I mean, certainly with Christ, there is that application of it.
Right.
But it's also people around the world that hadn't heard about Christ yet.
Yeah, and it's, you're really kind of stumbling onto the shamanic around the world component. The Hopi obviously being Native American, um, but I know labyrinths are really found all over the world, and in shaman cultures. The reason why shaman is considered a culture and not a religion is because it doesn't have a central character. Even though Earth is the central character, even though humans are the central character, it doesn't meet the requisition of, I don't know, a non-tax discount. I don't know, but the idea that shamanism, predating any religion, quite frankly, it was actually the rule of organization. It was the rule of society. It was kind of how our cultural word of mouth was really kind of handed down. The labyrinth was found to have a lot of connection with, you would have the warrior be able to go into the center and find themselves to come out to fight for the tribe. You would have, a mother, needing to find what the purpose of their child was. I mean, those things were used on a regular basis. And although it might not have been as intricate of an 8 circuit or 12 circuit or what have you, there was always a pathway leading to that centerpiece with the same idea of what a labyrinth worked with. It's interesting. We have an Inca shaman that works with us here, and she talks about how the connections not only across every shamanistic practice, but how everything really kind of landed itself in some sort of religious connotation one way or another. I mean, whether you want to talk about the whether you want to talk about the incense at church, being the smudge, or whether you want to talk about the 4 directions, whether you want to talk about the medicine wheel. And when you look at the medicine wheel, it is a cross. So we can keep going there, and we can talk about it being the astrological sign over the Son of Man sign, but that's a podcast for another time. But they're all interconnected, and I think that's the interesting part of this. Did you have anything cool or weird happen when you were, I'm going to say weird because that's what people really want to tune in for, but did you have anything like really profound, I'll use the word profound, happen while you were creating this or while you were walking through a labyrinth?
I because I was going to be talking with you today, I kind of went back to the journal, to the time when I was doing it. And what I found was that there was a dream while I was doing it of 2 baby owls.
Stop.
I knew you'd love that.
2 baby owls, huh?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just a little bit for our listeners, the owl was something of my grandmother's that became really kind of the family symbol. It comes up for me often on my journey. So the owl is my grandmother, Kathy's mother. By the way, we should probably mention that Kathy's my aunt now. That is actually a big piece of my path. The owls are a big deal. So that's really, really cool. And it's funny, even in the bumper music that comes in and out, you'll get a kick out of this. He is actually the guitarist of a band called Owl. So it just keeps going. It just keeps going. I didn't piece it together until after I started doing some of the editing work and approaching people to use their bumper music and whatever. But it's funny.
Is the 2 owls, and they were baby owls. One is the above and the other is the below. And they were babies because I was just building it. And, that was 8 years ago. And it is just a very nurturing, satisfying, uplifting kind of place in my life.
And I also think too that with our with this podcast that we've been talking about now, this comes up all the time, even though we're just a few in, is the journaling. Like how important it is to jot things down, whether it's a dream, whether it's a sighting, whether it's a sensation, a feeling, that sort of thing. If you're trying to develop your gifts, you do it so then you can start to kind of build your psychic dictionary. Like, hey, I'm seeing this when this is going on. When you're journeying and you're bringing people through to, through to kind of understanding what your path is going to be, your dreams that have 2 owls in it are incredibly significant, for all the reasons that you just said. So it's a blessing all the way through. And it's just funny that you're bringing up, I went back to my journals. Tracy, come on, you kind of got to laugh at that, because that's just something that we talk about all the time in development and being able to develop your own skills and abilities. You really have to jot this down, because there isn't a playbook. There is not a thing where you just say, here you go. I mean, there's great books out there. You know, you can do a bunch of really cool exercises. You could, pick up a book, say The Artist Way, and, take those and, have that be really significant to you. That's an inside joke between Kathy and I, because that was the book that she got me when I was 13 years old. And I thought, what is this? It's a book. And then 6 months later, 9 months later, I don't even remember how long, it wasn't terribly long after, I ended up picking up the book because I was homesick with chickenpox or something where I could go to school, or I couldn't go to school, but I wasn't really sick anymore. And, sure enough, I just opened up that book, and I think it's not meant to be taken cover to cover, but I remember doing one thing after another in that book and always finding solace in it. So that was the beginning. That was the opening of my labyrinth, where my gut feeling was like, hey, there's something here for this. I need to work with it.
I just wanted to say I've used labyrinths in Christianity. When I was probably in my teens, we did retreats for confirmation kids. Like, we got our confirmation, and then we would do retreats for them to prepare them. And we had a little, I think it was, maybe the Sisters of St. Joseph. I'm going to say the wrong ones, and they're going to come after me at some point in my dreams tonight. But we had a little villa, a little retreat center that they had a prayer labyrinth. And they always encouraged us to go out there. And I like also with the labyrinths about all the different religions it brings in, like with setting intention. And we were told, like, with each step, set a mantra, which is very similar to Buddhism. And looking back now at it, as an adult, you can say that, but like we would use it, with saying something about Jesus or God with each step, breathing in and out. And that was done as prayer. You can do a different mantra and set it as meditation. I love how it's encapsulates and is open to all religions and all beliefs and all paths.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of that ultimate non-denominational tool, and leave it to the Catholics to just put the word prayer in front of anything, and then it's like, it's a prayer labyrinth, okay. And by the way, giant crow right in front of me. Everybody's saying hi today. Second time today. But yeah, it's funny how it changes, because it's got to be palpable to the people that are in charge or are receiving it or whatever. But the intention is still the same. The construct of it is still the same. It was still, an 8 circuit, a 10 circuit, a 12 circuit. It still had very specific things to it that tradition has, but their approach to it could have just been the way that it was meant to be approached. And in your path, Tracy, you saw it at the time that you saw it to spark, like, okay, why do we not have this in every church? Well, we don't have this in every church because it's kind of a universal thing, kind of beyond the church, but this one just happens to bring it in.
And I know the youth group we were in, we were a little ruckus for the Catholic Church. We did things a little differently, brought in music and stuff. Like, we were in a parish that was older. And so our youth group was just, we changed the way they did a lot of thinking.
Until you get a call at home by the bishop at 10 o'clock at night, you haven't lived. I'm just saying. Oh, we're not sharing personal stories? Okay, all right. But I think it's interesting too that they are prevalent and they can be used for this tool. And Kathy, I want to thank you for joining us today. This to me is something that I think is very practical, and I think people can follow along. Whether it's doing a finger trace, a finger labyrinth, or if it's walking it, however in depth it is that you want to. If you follow us at spiritreeconnections.com, follow our Facebook page. I'm actually going to have posted out there the map or link to the maps of all the labyrinths for the American Labyrinths Association, I think it's called. Wonderful. And they have a really cool, it's actually pretty resourceful, and it's updated fairly regularly. It's actually what do you call it? It's kind of user driven. So it's kind of like a wiki page in a way, where it's like, hey, I went to go visit this one, but the owner didn't let me in, or the town park hours are only until dusk, so you want to get there early, whatever the case may be. So it's good information out there. So is there anything else you wanted to add at all, Kathy, to the world of
Brandon,
Labyrinth?
talked about the another possible use of it was in the initiation schools, in that is a model of the process of the soul's involution into materiality, and then the evolution out through the many lifetimes. So that
speaking our language.
Yeah, and the first labyrinth that I know of was in ancient Egypt. And it was 2 levels. There was an upper level and a lower level.
Of course. It's funny, the Egyptian shamanism thing. We may have to have you back for something like that. But it's funny. The more that you read about ancient Egypt, and I know that's certainly your bailiwick. So I'm not going to say something I don't know. But the things that I keep reading is how synchronized ancient Egypt was to shamanism.
Yes, definitely.
It's right down to the amorphication of humans from animals to just all of it. It just was so synchronized, and the above and below. and for me, I've always felt like there was more than the initial dialogue, and when you start to learn a little bit more, and it's great that a labyrinth is actually the catalyst into that, which is, I don't know, it's just super cool. Super cool. So Kathy, again, I want to thank you for being part of things here.
Tracy, thanks for having me.
Tracy, great job as always, and we want to have you back. I know that there's a whole bunch more stuff we can talk about. I don't want to tease it too much, but I think we just teased a little bit there. But thanks so much, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Russ. You already know I love to talk, but did you also know that I love to create music and soundscapes? Well, my latest CD, Sanctuary, is going to be out June 12th. This CD was created as part of my journey. It has soothing piano, sound bowls, and guitar. I really enjoyed making this, and it is part of my journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the soundscapes that are created. Some of them have very specific flow to them, while others are very kind of just meditative. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed making it. Sanctuary, a meditative space, is now available at iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, and other great online music centers. Thank you again. See you soon. And wherever your journey takes you, remember to keep going.